So on this episode, we'll talk about the first phone call we got from the workplace.
Yeah, so it started off as a normal Monday. The boys were excited to go to work. They worked afternoon shifts. So they started at 2, finished at 10. Ryan was getting ready to go back to work that day.
I was actually halfway out to Walkerston when I got the phone call from Keisha.
Yes, so Christian rang me at 4:40 p.m., screaming and yelling and crying, and like I couldn't understand a word he was saying. All I could make out was Ethan's been in an accident, that there was an ambulance coming. So I had to tell him, like, Christian, just scream back at him, give me the phone to someone who I could understand. So he ended up giving me to a workmate who explained the whole lot and said that we needed to get to the hospital ASAP.
So Makesha gave me the phone call. My workmate turns around straight away, took me back to the hospital. Here we are, waiting. It felt like an eternity. But eventually the ambulance did show up,
Would have
and
been what, about 7 p.m. they turned up at the hospital?
it was about a 3 hour wait, I reckon.
Mm.
It felt a long time. It took multiple ambulances, police, everyone to get him stabilised, bring him to the hospital.
By the time we were allowed in the back room, I think it had been probably maybe another hour after they had arrived at the hospital.
At this stage, we still didn't know the extent of the injury, didn't know what happened, nothing. So everything was just a guessing game, I suppose.
So when we went out in the back and saw him laying there on the hospital bed, he was filthy from work, obviously. He had big hematoma lump on his forehead, lots of grazes, falling in and out of consciousness. And that's when the doctor said that he had to go to Townsville because he did have, at that stage, they were saying there was a bit of bone pressing on his spinal cord that needed to be surgically removed. So even at that stage, we still didn't know that he had a spinal cord injury.
So once we got told he was going to be airlifted to Townsville, we basically went home, packed as much as we could, and started driving. Now, the drive from Mackay to Townsville is roughly about 4 hours. In those 4 hours, I was probably said about 10 words to my wife, and it was a long drive.
It was a really long drive. I think we were just trying to process. Now the tears are coming. We were just trying to process what we had been told and driving to like the unexpected, not knowing what we were going to find out once we got to Townsville.
So we probably got there about 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
No sleep, tired, stressed, all the emotions are running. So we arrived in the Townsville Emergency Department, and they took us directly up to the Surgical Ward 3.
That's where they had taken him straight up there. It was obviously early hours of the morning, so there was only skeleton crew on. But there was a lovely nurse that we first met. Her name was Tanya. She said they don't normally do this, but because we had nowhere to go, we hadn't had any time to arrange accommodation or anything. She set us up a couple of little beds in a little area of the hospital. Not that we could sleep.
Yeah, I didn't get any sleep that night.
No, like, I mean, we tried, but we just couldn't. But I think it was about 7 a.m. We went back into the room with him after being, down in the little area for a couple of hours. And that's when the surgeons came in to let us know what they had found on scans. I was taken aside with a different doctor, Dr. Ben, and Ryan was taken aside by another surgeon, Dr. Rui.
Absolutely legend, Dr. Rui.
Well, Dr. Ben, I know it's his job and they say it all the time, but he's the one that told me. He just looked at me and he goes, he has a severe spinal cord injury and he will never walk again. He has a burst fracture to the L2 vertebrae and will need surgery. They also told us at that stage that he had a tethered spinal cord, which we never knew. Apparently he was born with that. So that made his surgery a lot more complex.
So the next few days was just the waiting game, waiting for a surgery date, waiting for the injury to relax and
Sort of just like swelling to go down a bit.
Yeah. Yep.
We were given his surgery date after like them talking to other surgeons in different hospitals to find out whether,
Because no one had any idea.
because his case was so complex because of the tethered spinal cord, they didn't know whether to untether it and risk the injury going further up or keep it tethered, which is what they went with in the end. But the 26th of the 9th, so almost a week later, well, almost 10 days later, is when he had his first surgery, where they did a spinal fusion. So 2 rods, one on each side of the spine, and 8 bolts holding it all together.
We got told it was only going to take about 3 hours, but it ended up being about 6.
Yeah, 6 or so.
That was a really long wait. As you can imagine, he's come out of surgery and he's sore, tired, and he was really nasty.
He was. All the medication he was on, he was just in so much pain as well. He was nasty to me. He'd be like, "Get me water," and just stuff like that. But we understood that he was in pain. I mean, come on. He just had 2 rods and bolts put in your spine. Who wouldn't be in pain?
Yeah, I probably would have been a lot nastier. But over the next few days, it was just basically just laying there. He could not move. He could not turn. Couldn't do anything. Couldn't get his bed comfortable. He was just made to lay in that one spot, which was really hard to see. So 8 days later, and his first physio happened.
He was done really well in that session. He sat up for 2 minutes, assisted, obviously. And then after physio, we asked if he could be wheeled out into the sunshine for a little while. So he got to sunbake in the garden for 10 minutes, and then we went and relaxed on the balcony for about 15 minutes.
Which is really good for his mental health.
So everything was going well over the next almost month until the 16th of October, when they were doing just their pre-surgical, post-surgery checks on his scarring, and had noticed that one of them had opened up right over the bolt. And it turns out that he needed to go back into surgery as he had a staph infection get into the metalwork. So the 17th of October is when he went in for his second surgery to have a washout.
On that surgery, he went in at 1:30 and came out at 6.
We thought that it was going to be, just in and out, open the wound, bit of a washout, and be out in, a couple of hours. But that surgery was almost just as long as his first initial surgery.
Yep.
So after he'd recovered from that, recovered, whatever you want to call it, from that surgery, the surgeons did come in and they said that he would need to get a PICC line installed. So that's where they put a line in from your arm that goes through the arteries right close to your heart, so that he could have intravenous antibiotics from infectious diseases to try and get rid of the staph infection that had got into the metalwork. And it also meant that they could take all his blood work from that PICC line as well. So he didn't have to worry about getting cannulas and getting stuck with the needle like every day, multiple times a day.
Pincushion.
Yeah. So we did that, went and had that done. The next day he, hopped in his wheelchair that he had for about an hour, went out to the balcony and got some fresh air, went to the gym. We had no word on the infection at that stage, just all we knew was that it was some sort of staph infection.
Yeah, infectious diseases can take swabs and grew it in the lab to find out which staph it was. So everything was looking really well. But unfortunately, things took a ride for the worst. 10 days later, he was back in surgery having another clean out.
Yep, the infection had returned, and it was obviously MRSA, they called it, so a form of staph, and they had to go back in and clean him out again, which also took
Hours.
hours and hours, and which also delayed his chances of getting into spinal rehab.
I think that's where they installed that drainage bag too.
Yeah, he had drains put in his back, which he was not thrilled about.
They gave him a lot of pain, discomfort.
It did, and whenever he got hoisted to go for his shower and whatnot, the hoist would pull on those drains. So at this stage, Ryan had returned to work, and it was just Ethan and I. I got to say, he did not recover very well from this surgery at all. This last one, he was always sick. Whatever he ate or drank, he'd be coming straight out the other end. He was like vomiting and pooping, everything. He lost probably over the next few days. He lost quite a few kilos. And that's when they come and took a stool sample to let us know that the infection's still there, but he was on the antibiotics and that they were keeping it down.
You can just imagine me. I had to return to work, obviously. Still needed money, some money coming in, and it was hard. It was really hard. I struggled a lot. It wasn't just Ethan with the workplace accident. It was also our twin, Ethan's twin,
Christian.
Christian. He suffered a massive hematoma on his right calf, and
A lot of mental health issues.
a lot. He still to this day, 9 months later, he's still struggling a lot. It was really tough back then. Well, it still is. Don't get me wrong, but back when it was fresh, it was really tough for me to go back to work because I just wanted to be with my family.
So over the next few days, things started to settle down a bit for Ethan. He started to get better, got back out and about and doing his physio and in his chair. And then all of a sudden, it wasn't so good anymore. So on the 11th of November, the infection was back and had to go in for his third surgery for clean and rod removal. He came out of surgery just after midnight because they took him straight in. They removed half of his metalwork as there was major tissue death from the infection. They got it all out. So now he only has one rod left in his back and four screws.
Bolts.
Yeah, four screws. He had a bit of oxygen trouble coming out of this surgery, but pain-wise, he was doing really well, better than most of his surgeries. I assume that was because they got the whole infection this time.
I don't know if you would understand what we're talking about here, but Ethan wanted these round icy poles now,
Lemonade.
the lemonade flavour, the ones where you used to push out the bottom and they used to pop up the top. I cannot remember what they were called, but back when I was a kid, they were the rage.
Oh, and they had them in the hospital, and after every surgery in recovery, they'd give them to him. I think one of the surgeries he came out and he was so happy because they gave him two. He had one in each hand.
Do you think we could find these in the shops
We looked
anywhere?
everywhere.
None. Couldn't find anything. So he was a little bit grumpy about that, but oh well, what can you do?
That's it.
So everything was looking
Good, yeah, really good after the metal was taken out. He recovered pretty well from that. Doctors came in on their rounds. Everything looked as it should. He had the drains in again, which obviously he still was not happy about. Those set of drains actually stayed in for about 2.5 weeks, which is, I think, what helped with the infection.
obviously having half the metalwork removed was a bit of a risk, but it's had to be taken.
Yeah, well, they said that it was either, leave that metal in and keep getting the infection and risking it go through to the other side, or they took that out. So obviously taking it out was the best option. At this stage, poor Ethan has already lost over like 30 kilos being in hospital. So that would be muscle mass due to infections as well.
So on the 29th of November, Ethan was referred to Townsville Rehab Centre, which is still on the same property as the hospital, but under a different roof.
So we spent about 2.5 weeks there waiting for a position to open up at Princess Alexander Spinal Rehab in Brisbane. He did some physio there. They started teaching him how to transfer from his chair onto the physio beds. They did some, put his legs in hoists and did some swinging to get some movement happening in his legs. So 14th is when he went to Brisbane by Royal Blind Doctors.
And we couldn't go on the plane, so we drove home from Townsville.
Yeah, it was me by myself, really, because you were at work. So I packed up the car, drove to town, drove home, and I had a flight booked for me the next day. I arrived in Brisbane on the 16th.
We didn't really touch base with this, but all the nurses, doctors in Townsville, absolutely fantastic. I would like to mention a few names, but probably won't. They know who they are if they listen to this podcast.
There was quite a few favourite ones there.
Oh, yeah.
And we had some nicknames for them too, which obviously we can't say.
But, we don't know if it's against the law or unethical to name names. I know that at the end of the day, they're just doing their job. But the way they done their job was...
It was amazing. They really made Ethan feel at ease and comfortable.
It wasn't just Ethan, it was us too.
Definitely.
The support there was overwhelming.
It was. So we think we'll leave this episode at this for now, and our next episode will be from when we got to Brisbane Rehab and how that all started.
Until then, I hope you enjoy this podcast. Our aim with this whole thing is to possibly help
Other families going through similar experience that we're going through and what our son's going through.
We aren't medical professionals, and we're certainly not social workers or psychiatrists, etc. We are just everyday, normal people that have lived through this experience and are still living through this experience.
Yeah.
And by this, we hope our experience can help other people. Until then,
We'll catch you later and be safe.
yeah, and we'll talk about Brisbane Rehab next episode. Thank you.